Good morning. April the 20th of 2017. Reading in our one-year Bible, English Standard Version, reading all the way from the front to the back. So we're getting there, folks. I mean, this much right here is what we've read this year. For some of you, that's more than you've read all the way through the Bible ever. And again, we don't want to make it a religion or a rule or a law that we have to do this, but it is exciting when we have that desire in our hearts to read about the Lord and to get to know His heart and to study. So this morning in April the 20th, we continue reading in Joshua chapters 21 and 22, and Joshua continues the occupation of the promised land. He continues to bring the tribes over from the other side of the Jordan River into the land flowing with milk and honey. And he's establishing all these new cities and places. And in today's reading, I was caught by a word that just kept coming up in these first couple of pages. The Old Testament reading is pretty long today. And the word pasture land just kept, it says it over and over and over again. And as I was reading, I was even trying to kind of understand what God was saying. Why all of a sudden, this is our 21st and 22nd chapter of Joshua. Most of Joshua has been about occupying the promise that God gave them. The land, remember, represents to us today whatever promise God's given you. And today it was pasture land. And so I just kind of very quickly, I didn't do any research on it. This is my morning Bible study. I just log in. Sometimes I read right before I log into the video. Other times I'll read it when I first get up. But I didn't take any time to do any research this morning, so this is all off the top of my head. But what comes to your mind when the word pasture land is spoken, or you read the word pasture land? Because it came up many times today. Let me just count just a few more. There's one in verse 11. There's one again in verse 13, and again in 16. In fact, another one in 16. There's 5 before even 19, 6, 7, 8 times, 9 times, 10 times, 11 times on the first page, 11 times just on the first page, pasture land. So, what pops up when you think of the word pasture land? Now remember, let's put this into context of what's happening with Joshua. Joshua is assigning the land to God's people, to the Israelites. And remember, we've talked about that land represents whatever promise God's put inside of our heart. It may be our purpose, why we're born. What purpose do we have here in this world? I know I've shared with you, for myself, I enter into the promised land the moment that God uses me to help somebody that's hurting. That is my promised land. That is the land flowing with milk and honey for me. For you, it may be being the very best mama you can possibly be. For you, it may be being the very best grandma or nana that you possibly can be. For others, it may be, being the very best mechanic you possibly can be. It's unique, and it's as individual as our thumbprints are. It is the dream inside of us that God's given to each one of us, individually, uniquely. Yours won't be mine, nor should it be mine. However, we're reading about Joshua making the assignments of the land to the Israelites, and all of a sudden in today's reading, pasture land keeps popping up. So for me, immediately I thought of peace. I had a vision in my mind of looking out across the barbed wire fence at this flowing green grass blowing in the wind, and immediately peace is what I thought of. Then as I continued to think of it more, as the word pasture land just kept coming up and up in this very next column, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 times in the first 5 sentences, the word pasture land came up. So there's 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's if I don't miss any, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, at least 20 times just in this one column. In this one column, there's at least 20 times that God mentions pasture land. And I just have learned about my God that when he repeats something, there's usually a reason. In fact, I'm just talking myself into probably doing a lot more research on my own about this word pasture land. But again, I gave you the vision. I had this green, flowing grass just blowing in the breeze on the other side of a barbed wire fence. And then from there, I think about prosperity, because this green grass is going to feed all of the cattle, all of the livestock. It represents rain, because the grass won't be green without rain. It just, it can go on and on and on into, it really represents everything good. Everything good. And if you think back to then, in that day, I mean, I'm a country girl, so I probably have an advantage over this in that I grew up on a farm, and I understand the value of green pasture land. But in today's world, not that many of us are familiar with pasture lands like they were back here. Back in this day, that the reason that was so important in the historical context of this writing that we're reading in Joshua is it represented the ability to not just to live, but to thrive. Because that's how they made their living. I mean, their livestock and their cattle and the things they could grow was the way they survived in the wilderness, and then into a brand new foreign land. This new land flowing with milk and honey is not someplace they'd ever been. And so it represented everything good for them. It represented hope. I mean, that's what it represented, was hope. And God just lavishly handed it out. Joshua just lavishly handed it out. God through Joshua. All good and perfect things come from the Lord. So if there's anything good going on, it's from God. And then kind of wrapped it up for me here in verse 44. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of all their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given all their enemies into their hands. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. Wow. All came to pass. What is the promise that's inside of you that God's planted on the inside of you? What is it that you're sensing through hope and faith is going to happen? Faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the substance of things not seen. I mean, they had to cross over into the promised land on faith. They had not ever seen it. There was only 12 that had crossed over as spies to see it, and 10 of them are gone. Only Caleb and Joshua had actually with physical eyes seen this land that they're entering into. They had to cross over to a land called the land of milk and honey by faith. And that's what God's asking us today to do. What is it that in the physical world looks hopeless and looks helpless and looks as though nothing good can come out of it? And God is telling us that we're entering the pasture lands, that we're entering into, if we just don't give up. And if we don't murmur and complain, I mean, for crying out loud, these folks could have been there 40 years sooner if they hadn't mumbled and complained. And I mumbled and complained this morning. I mean, you saw that thought just come into my head. Just this morning, I mumbled and complained. I'll repent. And I don't repent because I have to repent because my sins aren't covered. I repent because it changes my heart when I repent. They could have been there 40 years sooner. But whatever it is, that is the dream that's inside of us, that God's planted on the inside of us. Today's reading is the promise that he keeps his promises, that he's faithful. Today's reading is that pasture land represents rest for us, that what is coming for us is good because it's from him if we just don't give up. God bless y'all.